Good tidings, adventurers. I'm Justin the Wizard, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, bringing you Season 2, Episode 3 now of our Fairly Magical podcast. Like usual, we're going to be starting with mindfulness, and today we're also welcoming another guest. We're hosting Jeff Riedel-Bicknell, a friend of mine and a fellow board certified coach. So we'll get to that after the mindfulness section. If you do choose to skip forward, look for that pause icon on the screen as an indication that the mindfulness section is done. Mindfulness tends to be a very personal experience that some people choose to skip forward for. And we totally understand if you do choose to participate, you're always invited. And here we go. Nature. This word will mean something different to you than it does to me. Take a step down the path. See your mind's understanding of the natural world. As you walk down this path in your mind's eye, remember that we, the people of the world, have a stewardship role to play in nature. Your role may be small, it may be large. You could have a direct role to play. You might have to play your role indirectly. Everything that is done in stewardship of nature is a vital service either way. So, adventurers, welcome. Again, this is the Fairly Magical Podcast, and I'm Justin the Wizard. Jeff, welcome.
Hi, thank you for
Would you
having
like to
me.
introduce yourself? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. I'm Jeff, as Justin said, a national board certified health and wellness coach. Yeah, I'm just here to talk about some of my experiences with nature in my own life and nature in coaching and some other experiences I've had with nature throughout my life and career journey. So we'll see where we will see where this goes as the conversation goes on.
We're looking forward to it. And first, before we get into that discussion, the cards have something to say to us every time. So, Elena,
Ooh. All right. Hello, I'm Elena Lunt. I'm the Chaos Coordinator on the Fairly Magical Podcast. And today I've brought the Woodland Wardens deck by Jessica Roux. And this deck is so beautiful. It's also the one that gave us my favorite saying, "Good on you, Rooster." Yay! There it goes. Takes a minute. All right, we're
to center
shuffling
it
our
apparently.
cards. Shuffling our cards with intention. Good nature themed deck. What is it going to give us? The lizard and the pitcher plant
Ooh.
representing stagnation. Ooh, that's cool. I love carnivorous plants. Pitcher plant's a good one.
The danger
Okay.
plants.
Oh, we've got the ladybug and the sweet pea representing happiness. Oh, that's so sweet. Oh. No fucking way. We've got the raccoon and the sycamore. My Lord and Savior, Saint Jimothy. representing curiosity, of course. Okay. Stagnation, happiness, and curiosity. That's a really interesting trio.
Especially so, okay, sweet pea is something it's in the center of the reading, right? So you've got um, these three creatures and three plants in a
Yes.
reading of three cards in this deck. And the way that I described my notes, it put the word sweet pea in the middle. Uh, this is a scientifically significant plant. This is one of the plants that was used for its presentation of floral color in the discovery of genetics. I believe
Really? I
it's
had
like
no
red,
idea.
pink, and white pea flowers had a
Yeah.
role in learning like genetics and specifically I want to say it's the Punnett squares or whatever the um, that specific like phenotyping, that sort of thing, was learned
Okay.
through these flowers.
That is so cool.
And so, you know, kind of a pin in the middle of this reading is this scientific connection. But then there's a lot of whimsy and lizard, ladybug, and raccoon. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whimsical set, a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and the pitcher plant contributes a lot of whimsy as well, uh,
Yes.
especially when you imagine the pitcher plant from a smaller perspective.
Yeah.
And then the sycamore is a towering presence compared to everything else here.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a big tree.
But then if I turn to the meanings, you got stagnation into happiness and curiosity. And this is where my first question for Jeff comes in. So, Jeff, you like to coach in nature.
Yeah.
You like to take people from a state where they're stagnating and encourage them to find happiness through the curiosity of nature.
Be a good way to say it, yeah. Yeah. And I I want to comment on the cards a little bit too because
Of
they're
course.
so incredibly meaningful in so many ways. Um
Mhm.
so again, of course, again, you said stagnation. I mean, that's elemental to such a understanding of life and life's journey, right? Like if we get stuck and our ways of getting unstuck or unstagnated or whatever often require some kind of external, whether it's a coach, whether it's a friend, whether it's a change. So that's really powerful. The pitcher plant, I have to say, so first of all, that's native. I live in Virginia. It's native to our region. There's actually an amazing botanical garden outside of Richmond that I actually coach with people in, and that my partner and I we love to go to. We take friends and family, so I go there on a regular basis, and they have this amazing you know areas with these pitcher plants. And my partner, she actually we have pitcher plants at home that we raise carnivorous plants. So it was like so incredibly like meaningful. And then the
Oh, that's
tie-in with
awesome.
yeah. So when you said pitcher plant and lizard, I was like, oh my gosh, and the stagnation. Um, the sycamore tree, the other big piece is like trees for me. Um, like they're just so elemental to everything in my life. And I find them to be so meaningful. My coaching is housed under something called Functional Roots Wellness. I grew up in the Northern California redwoods. Um, you know, uh, I actually grew up all over because talking about nature and nature forms and things. my mom was a environmental ecologist and forestry science professor. So I actually was raised, like born into this and raised in this science world of interacting with nature and studying it. So it's been a common theme throughout my entire being. So yeah, very cool. Very interesting to see the intersection of all these things. And of course, Justin, you have to
Yeah.
pull out the science stuff, which I,
Yeah.
took me back to, biology, which was always one of my favorite subjects early on, which really got me stimulated in school. And yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that and fruit flies. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I I took a high school level genetics class
Yeah,
as an elective when I was in my last year of high school, and I remember the fruit flies experiments that we were able to do in the classroom.
yeah, yeah.
We also studied the pea flower.
Yep.
I
Same.
specifically remember both things.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Mhm.
I think the other big thing too, going back to the meaning behind the cards. Of course, I mean, Alana, I mean, we have to. I mean, feral raccoon. I mean, raccoon. I mean, how can we not call that out with our agent of chaos here, right? Like,
I mean, I was so excited to pull that
of
card.
course you were. So yeah. And I mean, Justin, you made the link. I mean, this whole we could go on and on forever about this, and I'll pause here. But I just want to reiterate back the meaning of all these things, aside from these great you know, animal and plant interactions that come up in the cards, but the meaning, that curiosity, stagnation, and happiness, right? Like, man, are those like the three legs of a stool, right? Or sort of like, things that are so intertwined and intersected in terms of how we're trying to navigate things that, you know, um, what we yearn for, what we strive for, what we think we need, and try to create that usually, trying to maybe create happiness rather than exist in happiness, right? Within our state can often be a state of stagnation, right? And that can create this great angst. And how we get out of that, right, is by being curious about our current state instead of getting stagnant in it. So yeah, I'll
Yeah,
pause.
I mean,
Totally.
the the pitcher plant grows in, bogs and
Yeah,
in stagnant water. So yeah, I mean, that's a good reminder that, under the right conditions and given the right, nutrients, that growth can come from that stagnation.
yeah, yeah.
Doesn't have
You know,
to
I think it's
stay empty.
I think it's really important to note too, like um, in the mindfulness meditation piece, sort of that prepped us for this too. Um, you did a wonderful job, Justin, of talking about how we all have a different, I mean, all of us, right? We all have a different lens. No matter how well we connect, we all are very unique. How we experience the world, how we process the world, how we sense the world, and then how we make meaning of the world. It is so unique to each one of our internal systems of existence. But I think it's important to note that the pitcher plant, like you can't care for a pitcher plant, like because we do have them at home. So
Yeah, so do I.
you can only give them rainwater or like we have a great friend, a couple friends are research scientists, in labs. So they bring what my wife fondly calls science water. It's deionized water, right? Because
Okay.
you can't grow these carnivorous plants in city water, right? Because the
No.
chemicals like will kill them, right? So
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't always water a house plant with like the toxic water that we drink in our municipal water systems, but you can just like we can kind of survive for a while with it, but a pitcher plant will not. So
No.
it's got to
No.
be fed
Not at
with
all.
and sit in rainwater that again, so that intention about how do you care for nature, whether it's that minuscule, like you said, do you go out and appreciate it and observe it sometimes? Do you grow some of it at home? Do you bring a little piece into your home? Um, so that nurturing piece, like you have to have the knowledge and you have to make the effort. Like you have to remember, like, you know, and when my wife is away and I'm in charge, I have to remember, like, I have to water, I have to go to the rain barrel to water those plants, or I have to get some
Yeah.
science water to water those plants. I can't pull it out of the faucet. You
Yeah.
know?
Science water, distilled water, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Or
deionized water, yeah.
yeah,
So it's
okay.
not just distilled, it's literally deionized. It's like the stuff you
Okay.
use in a lab. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like actually oh, it just has to have like no There's no electrolytes or whatever added to it.
No, no, it's
That would
literally
include
pure.
chlorine and stuff like
Right,
that we
right.
use all the
I think
time. So
deionized water is just almost purely the hydrogen and oxygen. Like it's pretty much it's pretty
Hmm.
as stripped down as it gets about to for yeah.
science water.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We need
That's
the
the best title
special
for it.
water.
It's science water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, so stagnation's also interesting because if I were to characterize the average presentation of a new coaching client, in my experience at least, it's, hey, I'm in a state of stagnation, broadly speaking, like, you know, I have stagnated and haven't gotten out of this loop.
Mm.
That is kind of something I hear over and over again in different forms, different specific examples. And everybody wants to achieve happiness, right? Nobody shows up at coaching is like, I want to be sad at the end of this. And so what what the coach what
Hold
the
on
coach's
now.
job,
There,
oh,
there,
Hang
there, there
on, you
may
broke
be there
Jeff.
may be a special coaching niche for this. Okay, this
I
could be
guess so.
like.
Yeah, I guess so.
Making me feel bad about myself.
Well, I don't know. Like, sitting in suffering can create a sense of, peace and well-being, maybe. I don't know.
That's fair. That's fair.
Acceptance.
Yeah, there's like a certain element of processing the emotions,
Yeah, yeah.
sitting in the negative in order to process it. There is some value to that. Uh, I my that I'll show what this looks like. My desktop background is something that is called either the feelings wheel or the emotions wheel, depending on how you look it up. And it's a really useful tool in coaching because you can show it to anybody and say, all right, so um, I know words are hard for emotions, but if you just try to like start from something broad and general and work your way from the inside of this feelings wheel or emotion, I'll put a picture up. If you start your way from the inside of this and work your way outside, you can say, okay, well, I'm kind of angry, I guess. Maybe am I more bitter or mad? I guess I'm more mad. Am I more furious or more jealous? I'm more furious, I guess. Right. And at least then you get some more clarity from, this is like a hypothetical coaching client in front of me trying to explain how they feel about something. And so now we've got this word furious. Okay, so fury. All right, what do you feel fury towards? This is something that you feel in a direction. It has a vector. And so then we can, keep asking questions, keep using curiosity to figure out what would actually make the client happy. And then just try to help the client enable that going forward, like enable the things that would make them happy, empower those.
So I want to jump in here if it's okay, and
Please.
trying to kind of jump into the compare and contrast because I've coached in different ways and sort of what I found and what drew me to coaching in nature, which and I have to I'll be completely honest, right? Like for me to be my best coach and to feel at ease and peace and great joy with coaching, or to be AKA happy, right? I actually realized that being in nature it makes me automatically be in a coaching space. But as I was, I have another profession that's a more mainstream medical profession, and so I've worked with clients for decades in many different settings. So I have a lot of experience with human to human interactions and navigating complex relationships and situations and helping people overcome adversity. Um, but it's often in environments that aren't super conducive to my well-being and also not super conducive to the well-being of my clients, right? And so that's what really drew me to coaching. And so going back to what the compare and contrast, so using tools like the feelings wheel, and there's so many great tools and they're so helpful. Coaching in nature, and I use this one great example, and it ties back to the cards too with this curiosity stagnation. So coaching in nature, I like to coach around water whenever I can. And being in Virginia, in the Appalachian Mountains and things like that, so I'm often near streams, rivers, forests, trails, lakes, bodies of water, and things like that. So I have this one spot, well, many spots. But the great thing about coaching when you're walking alongside a river, no matter how big or large it is that water is always flowing and moving. And oftentimes when water hits a barrier, you can look at that part of the water, and some part of the water will backflow. It'll create an eddy. Some part of the water will rush down and go fast. Some part of the water will meander and go slowly. And we get to these spots, with my clients, and I'll just kind of we usually walk and talk so that it's a move. So we're also getting movement and we're getting immersed in the environment and we're having these conversations. And I'll gently guide, like just, if you notice something, if something you see draws you out. And so we get to these kind of spots where we can look at this. And when you see a spot like that, you can use a tool like the feelings wheel or good questions, or you can use what's in your environment. And that's what I love about nature. So in that, when you have that, it's like they're feeling things because they're immersed in nature. And then you can ask these curious questions like, what do you notice about how the water in the stream right there is overcoming, and what are you drawn to? Like, does that, rushing over the edge feel fast? Do you feel like you're going backwards? What section? And like, as they identify and cue things, then I can say, well, gosh, what would it be like if you were rushing over the waterfall instead of feeling stuck in the eddy? Or like, and it's these metaphors that are like so visual and so present. And when you're in nature and seeing it and immersed in it and confronted with it like that, it often, you feel it even more so than you think it. And so with coaching, a lot of times we're trying to connect, we're in our heads. All of us get in our heads so much. And really we find our answers when we drop down into our bodies, when we start feeling and sensing, when we get into that more somatic world and we start listening. We listen to our gut brain, we listen to it at our cellular level, we listen to what our spirits and our energy and our, what we're drawn to, right? Instead of what we think we need to do, or we're working so hard to try to find happiness. So I love that, like coaching, we have so many different avenues. They're all great and they're going to be unique and different for each client and for each different coaching modality. And you don't have to be in nature to do it, right? You have these analogies. You could have a video you show, you could have sound play, you could talk about the mental imagery. So whether you're coaching to a screen, whether you're coaching across the world, anything like that. So I just thought of that sort of like the feelings wheel and the stream, like it being the same kind of like two different tools that are doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned like the stream is diverting water in like 3 or 4 or 5 different ways. That's not so different from the way the feelings wheel helps people to divide their feelings into
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6 different, subsections of the wheel, and then like refine and get more clarity from,
Yeah.
you know, understanding themselves through what they're seeing. And it's not the only tool that I use. Like one of the big tools that I end up using is helping my clients to, as quickly as possible, understand my frame on neurodivergent understanding, for example, through a specific Venn diagram that I speak to from my experience, which is the ADHD, OCD, autism Venn diagram. And it's very simple, just like it's like on simplypsychology .com or something like that. I can't remember the exact URL, but it's a very simple Venn diagram, and it's just got some like 2, 3 word at the most like symptom and experience descriptions that are associated with each thing. And because I identify with basically everything on the Venn diagram, I can kind of explain what all of it is and how each of them is different from the others in that Venn diagram. Not so that I'm not saying like I think my clients have OCD, ADHD, and autism like I do, but it's like this is how I understand neurodivergence because this is my experience. This is the diagnostics that I've gone through, and this is, um, you know, how I relate to it. You might relate to it differently as my client. You might have your own experience, your own diagnostic journeys. You may be in a different country where you don't have the DSM that we have in the U.S. And so like that's important too. Like Jeff, you mentioned being in like the medical traditional medical model as well, and that's its own different experience, its own side of the uh, treatment treatment paradigm, I guess.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Spectrum.
Um, so I'm going to turn the tables a little bit because I'm not the host, but I have a question for you, Justin.
Oh, yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, I'm curious to know what in like coaching experiences, obviously, in generalities, but like what kind of like surprising or exciting things do you find when your clients when they have that sort of like I can think of different examples from when I've been coaching, whether it's in nature or not, but like, what are you finding like when that aha moment or when you see that sort of shift like happen for someone, like what
So
surprises you or about the sort of like, I don't know, process, I guess, or almost universality of how that can happen when you create space for it. Because really what we're doing is creating it's that creativity, right? It's creating space
yeah,
for it to happen rather than trying to make it happen.
your coach is a mirror that isn't you. It's like a
Mm.
mirror that speaks truth to power.
Uh-huh.
That's a
Uh-huh.
coach.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's like a mirror that speaks truth to power, but helps you also achieve your goals by visualizing what those are. So it's like both things at the same time. It's like um, it's like if LeFou and the Magic Mirror were one character. So LeFou is the character that pumps up Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. By the way, that is
Yeah.
what I'm referring to there. So it's like the hype goblin, hype goblin character. Uh,
I
and
love
so
that.
it, Coach is a little bit hype goblin and a little bit mirror mirror. You know, the the mirror says, "Who's the fairest one of all?" It's Snow White. Sorry, Felicia.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Not
Not
you.
you.
And so coaches sometimes have the hard truths. We'll say the hard things,
Yeah.
and those end up being very transformative for clients. Is every once in a while when you whip out one of my favorite things to say to a client that ends a phrase or a sentence with "What's the point?" is I'll wait like 2 seconds and I'll say, "What is the point?"
Mm. Like if the client says, "What's the point?" And then you'll
Yeah,
just
yeah,
reflect it right back to them.
absolutely. Like
Like
if
a
they
good,
like
a
rhetorically
good,
use "What's the
yeah,
point?"
a good uncomfortable pause, let it sit, and then just throw it right back, like, and be like, so, yeah, well, then, yeah, like to make them go to the next level. That gets
Hmm.
to, like, it shifts, right? Those kind of things are the shift between, like, I'm in my head, because, like, we get in our head, I want to be happy. I'm stuck. I got to change X, Y, and Z. I know what to do, but I can't do it. I'm the, and then, geez, I just sometimes just don't, I can't, what's the point? And then you, as the coach, hold that space. Just, envelop it, wrap it, create that magic, and then just kind of gently lob it back and be like, yeah. So what is the point?
They'll be like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the rating on this podcast is, but I have a tendency sometimes to watch.
unrated. We're not rated. We're
Oh.
we're available to be seen by any age group, but don't uh, we don't specifically market for younger audiences, if
No,
that's
I
what
was just
you're
I was just
asking.
teasing you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
the answer. We have an answer. Yeah.
there
So
you go. That is a real answer. It was a rhetorical
yeah,
question. You gave an
it,
answer.
it it's like in that teenage rating range somewhere
Yeah, yeah.
where it's like
Cool.
there's some language on this podcast. Yeah,
So,
we say shit. Oops.
See-do.
Yeah.
We
No,
have fun here, right?
no big
That's
deal.
what's most
We do have
important.
fun here. That's
Oh,
absolutely the most
We
important.
do.
I must say, I was thinking about this as we were talking, and sort of reflecting on what has drawn me to coaching, the sort of point I'm at with my coaching, and so I am in transition, still kind of finding myself, and trying to find a path. And I was thinking about, again, the whole realm of coaching, how you described, what coaching is in terms of that, like, your mirror analogy and such. And then kind of comparing and contrasting that to my experiences in other more structured, more traditional medical model roles. And as I'm thinking, both with current work I'm doing in both settings as well as throughout my past journey, um, it's not that I dislike or that I have any um it's not that I dislike my other profession, which is occupational therapy. It's a very powerful and amazing and creative profession. Especially when it's not well, heck, I'm going to share this because I will tell you actually where I very first talk about it. I've been around non-traditional practice and nature, human animal interactions for a long time. When I graduated from OT school, there was some big shifts in the market, and there was basically no jobs in traditional settings because there was a huge federal change in reimbursement. So like the year before I graduated, like there was like 100 jobs for every clinician out there, if not 1,000 jobs, right? And then the year I graduated, there was like 80% of the people in the profession were like laid off. Like 6 months later, they were hired again, like eventually, and it built back, but like right when I graduated. So I actually ended up, I had a very diverse background. I actually started my first experience with being in nature in a therapeutic environment. I was in 4-H. I was like 8 years old, and I was doing therapeutic horseback riding on the Northern California coast in the redwoods. Um, you know, that was my first experience. When I came with my master's degree in OT and my MBA and couldn't find a job, I actually ended up in the Florida Keys doing dolphin assisted therapy for a company called Human Dolphin Therapy. And my colleagues were dolphins. The environment I was working at was in the water, and we were combining traditional therapy, aquatic therapy, human animal interactions, natural environments to create these magical experiences for our clients. And I think that's why when I started getting into coaching, and a lot of the training is virtual, and we do a lot of this, and Justin and I actually met. The reason why we met was because we were both getting ready to take our national boards at the same time. And what happens when you're getting ready for your boards is you have to build up, after you finish your schooling, you have to build up a coaching log of hours of coaching, right? Like you have to, and so a lot of coaches who are getting ready, we swap sessions with each other. And it's a super cool learning environment. And then Justin and I also he did a tutoring program that I was part of for getting ready for the boards. But anyway, we were coach swapping. That's how we met. But in that intense time when I was just coaching to a screen with sometimes 6 or 8 or 10 people a day, back to back to back with these coaches all over the world and all over the country, I was like, as by the time I'd been staring at the screen all day, I was like, oh man, I got to get out for a walk with my dogs. I got to get out into the woods. I was just like, I was dying. And then when I started coaching some clients that were local, I was like, especially I had some people that like kind of I knew. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing something like this. And I started taking them out and I was like, oh, this is like, this isn't work. This is like, I don't have to work. I'm not drained at the end of the day. I don't have to work to be in my coaching presence. When I'm in my natural element out in nature, I'm already in a coaching mindset. And I also saw it be hugely beneficial for my clients. And then I found out that, especially all over Europe, there are some in the U.S. and it's growing, but this is huge in Europe, especially in the like Ireland, Scotland, UK in particular. Like I have this whole network of people now. And I'm like, why don't I live there? The weather's crummy, but but they still get out into
it's
nature.
cold and it's and it's so expensive.
But they're always
But
out in
yeah.
nature no matter what.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My wife is from Germany also, so I understand that, right? Like when we're in
Yeah.
Europe, like you know, cities in Germany, like towns and cities, like the whole national forest system, like it's not little paths or trails, like there's roads with road signs, and you can bike from city to city, like just through the woods. Like
Mhm.
it's maintained, like it's been there for hundred, like longer than this country's been around. These forests and roads have been around and maintained. It's just so
Yeah.
different. Like it's integrated in life, like so when you
Yeah.
and a lot, aren't you up in Canada?
I am in
So
Canada. Yeah, and I
yeah.
used to live in Ireland.
Okay,
It's
so you
a
know what I'm talking about,
Oh,
how
I
it's
didn't know
yeah,
integrated
that.
between
yeah.
countries and cultures, right?
Yeah, I went to college in Ireland, so yeah, I was there for a bit.
Nice.
But yeah, yeah, yeah. The one thing I love about the sort of the outdoor life in Germany in particular is the way that they raise their kids, and the way that outdoor life is just so ingrained in their
Mhm.
childhoods and like in their school systems as well.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
Well, I learned a lot from my wife, who before she's an occupational therapist also and a coach. But before that, she was a kindergarten teacher, but she was a kindergarten teacher trained in Germany, which kindergarten is actually a German word, Kindergarten,
Yes.
meaning kids in the garden, right?
Yeah.
That's what it means. And
Yeah.
in
It's outside.
Germany, yeah, yeah, it is. And in Germany, kindergarten is 3 years. It's early childhood education. And
Hmm.
it's mostly, it's like universal, sort of like what we would call universal, preschool kind of almost. It's early childhood
Hmm.
education, 3 years, and the often attached to, religious entities. There's a big, obviously Christian influence in Germany too. But regardless of that and your feelings on that, and we don't need to go there. But the systems, so the the different kindergartens all over Germany, like one is in the forest, another's on a
Hmm.
farm, like, and you can pick which one you go to. Like, oh, my kids are going to go to, and they go to the farm or they go in,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's like, like,
Yeah. No, it's
and
great. I mean,
and
I'm a former early childhood educator as well,
okay,
and
yep,
I ran a daycare out of my home for 10 years, and we're extremely fortunate to live in a house that backs onto a forest. Like there's our
uh-huh,
back gate, and that's the forest back there, and
yeah,
so it's like the kids and I were able to just spend hours out there. Let's look at what we can find on the forest floor, and let's,
yeah,
learn to identify some plants and learn to identify some birds by their songs. And like, let's climb this log. That's better than a
yeah,
playground.
yeah.
Climb a log.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
so,
as I
so
referred to,
beautiful.
like I grew up, with my mom being, a PhD level scientist. So, and she was in grad school when I was a kid. So I grew up, around people, in the forest who the one was a fisheries guy, another was an entomologist, another was a forest scientist. And that's what I like. I didn't. That's what everybody did. That's what we did. Like, like as a
Yeah.
kid, it was awesome. Like, it
Yeah.
was the research forest owned by the university, right? Like that we were at up in New Hampshire. You know what I mean? But like this was just magical for a kid. Like, and like, who are you going with today? I'm going with the fisheries guy. We're going out and catch fish. And I'm going with we're going to catch bugs today, and we're whatever. So, yeah,
So
That's
cool.
awesome. Love
yeah.
that.
Jeff, you said something a minute ago that caught my attention, which is I don't really remember exactly what you said, but that it was like not work for you to coach in nature. And it reminds me of something that was actually like a phrase brought to my attention by a client who learned it from like a YouTube video themselves.
Hmm.
So this is, not something that I'm like expert in or anything. It even like how I understand this concept is weak, but the concept was of this other video was if it's hard, it's wrong for you,
Mm.
right? That's like the
Hmm.
the parentheses after like if it's
Yeah,
hard, it's wrong for you.
yeah,
If it's wearing you down, not building you up, it's not the right like passion project for you at least. Like there
Right.
there is a certain need to like get your bills paid, and I understand all of that. Like people don't necessarily have the freedom to just do anything that they want with all of their time all of the time.
Why not?
Um,
I'm just saying.
yeah, yeah, we wish. And if you do get the opportunity to do something that doesn't feel like work, then great, because that's going to be a lot easier for you to manage than the thing that wears you down, burns you out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you mind if I get a little personal and share a little bit?
Go ahead.
Because this other, I know on this podcast you share a lot, and Alana too, around the neurodivergence. So, you talked about early childhood education, and my wife and I both worked in school-based pediatric OT for the first 15 or more years of our career, and now not now working more in geriatrics and acute care and things like that. But yeah. So interestingly enough, so you're talking about the what's right or wrong. I also myself have recently been, you know, dealing with late diagnosis. I guess I've been neurodivergent my whole life, but didn't necessarily realize that I was neurodivergent, right? And so I'm in that sort of category of like, really successful, really high functioning, but completely like, blew up in my mid 50s. And really struggling with all that now. And you know, I can do and I have to do in my other role because I've done it for decades and I have skills at it and I'm trained at it. But now that I know how hard that is for me and how the downstream effects are, and now at this age of, not being as resilient as I used to be and having that awareness, right? And then also knowing how what feeds me and what doesn't feed me. And I was reflecting on the things that I am finding meaning and joy in my current traditional work, which is, I'm working now with people much more at the end of their life that are in residential care. Lots of, I mean, I I would like I would like to be able to work with people when they still have some capacity to make choices that will, enhance their well-being. Um, Unfortunately, right now, the majority of the clients that I have in my traditional work role, they don't remember me from week to week, from session to session. They remember how I make them feel, but they don't know what I'm there for. They don't know who I am. They don't know what the purpose of it is. What's super meaningful and important is that I'm present there, human to human, and we have amazing connections and do amazing things. Um, that I have great meaning with. But the effort to find those moments in the construct of all the regulations of what I have to do and all the paperwork I have to do and all the showing progress and it's like, why can't we just, show up as a human being for a human being and again, look at stagnation and curiosity and generate some, this other going back to the thing, going back to the three words, curiosity, stagnation, and happiness. What I am learning for myself and what I'm seeing with my clients, right, is you cannot necessarily, and this is just my opinion. So just put on right. This is my thoughts right now, my personal experiences. But I think a lot of our, and for me, I wouldn't even say very personally, my struggles with happiness are about the fact that I'm thinking, you know, when this happens or when I achieve this or what that's the trap that we get into all the time, right? Oh, if I get this, if I do this, if I get this external accolade or this additional whatever, this will be what will make everything work, make everything fit. And the reality is, right, and this is what we find in coaching. What I love about coaching so much is I came to coaching because I thought it was a really cool skill and tool to learn to help me with my clients in my traditional role. Once I started learning more about coaching, I was like, I don't want to do my traditional role anymore. I want to only do coaching because this is amazing. And,
We're seeing a
being a
lot of
coach
like
now. Yeah,
they're
being a
like
coach now.
psychologists switching into doing coaching instead of psychology work.
Oh yeah.
Like
Well,
that's
because
like a
it's
thing we're seeing big time.
well, they both things have roles. And as a consumer, as well as a provider, there are massive values to both, right? Like, like I'm not saying I'm not going to a doctor or that I wouldn't go to a professional talk therapist, a counselor of some kind, and that I have like these are important things and it have their role. But at some point, right, differential diagnosis, labels, talking about all the things that are wrong with you and having somebody prescribe things for you to do to try to fix, or try to make that square peg fit in a round hole, like it only gets you so far. And what I love about coaching, both as a consumer, I mean, I myself, have coaches, right? When and where I can afford them and when I need them. It's part of my personal growth. It's part of my journey. It's part of my being a better coach. It's part of my, you know, I pursuit of happiness, I guess I would say, although I'm shifting that knowledge of pursuit of happiness to like, and actually, a coach that I work with that is coaching me has helped me a lot. And this is a coach that specializes in sort of the ADD neurodivergence coaching. I decided this is something I need to pursue because um, I need somebody who can help, who's had the lived experience and the professional training, right? Because I've had the lived experience and I've had the professional training, but then I didn't realize that I had the lived experience, and I got to put them all together. So it's like reframing my identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this coach of mine, right, like ask these kind of questions, or this sort of like, when we get to that, like, what's the point, Um, it's the same kind of thing. Like I'll be like, I'll get in this sort of like, in a coaching session, I'll be like, well, the job isn't a right fit because blah 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 blah. And then she's like, my coach is like, okay, so, then it's kind of like there's this pause, there's this beat, and then it's like, rather than listing all the things that aren't good about it or aren't a right fit, aren't feeding you, what can you find in it? And if you can't find anything in it, what are you going to do about it? Like, are you going to change? Are you going to leave? Are you like, and like that just, that those kind of questions are so powerful because they're all about this is what you've got now. And it's framing it in a positive way instead of this negative way. This is coaching, right? This is positive psychology. And this is like, therapy is talking about what was in the past and trying to identify and understand and label and compartmentalize and make it all kind of meld and fit. But at some point, it is what it is. And you got your current reality, and then you got to find a way to be, right? Not do, but be
Hmm.
in your current reality and find meaning and value in your current reality and take whatever energy you have left from that and those sparks, like those embers that are going to light fires for you, and then build on that to vision for and create this future. And that's what coaching is. So it doesn't matter whether you're a psychologist, talk therapist, an occupational therapist, a doctor, whatever. We talk all the time about meeting our clients where they're at. And in coaching, we talk about the same. You meet your client where you're at. But what you do, the different professions do different things after they do that. So that's a trick, right? You have to find an excellent human being who's a good professional too, who actually can meet you where you're at without
Yeah.
judgment, without getting bogged down by the system that we're in, without being overwhelmed by their own whatever, struggles or the struggles of the system they're working in. But even the best person who's a professional, who's a helping professional, when they meet you where you're at and they genuinely see you and hear you and respect you and give you that space, once they put their professional lens on, like if I put my occupational therapy professional lens on and I do it properly, it's going to be different. And occupational therapy and coaching are quite aligned because occupational therapy is very client centric, but it's still not coaching.
Yeah.
My approach as an occupational therapist, even if I meet the client in exactly the same way I define the problem, the path forward is slightly different as a coach versus an
It's
occupational.
reaching for a different tool in a different toolbox.
Yeah,
Uh, the
yeah.
coaches, there are a couple fundamental tools that I like to use, and coaches generally are taught. We call one the trans-theoretical model, the stages of change,
Mhm.
and the other, which we're kind of alluding, we talk about this medical model thing that we're saying, and Jeff and I are kind of referring to the Travis illness wellness continuum, which I can put up on the screen as well. And this is a cool one because the Travis
Mhm.
continuum shows health in the middle of a spectrum. This is a linear spectrum. This is one of the
Yeah.
linear spectrums that are useful in linear form. So
Yeah.
health is in the middle, and on the negative side, you've got illness, with premature death being the extreme. And on the positive side, you've got wellness with basically thriving and, happiness and all those things being the extreme. And what coaches do is get you to that thrive target, that wellness continuum
Yeah.
context. And what the therapist does is help you get from the illness space into the healthy space, which is still just neutral.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that I think that's different with coaches, and correct me what your thought on this is, Justin, is I think that even a coach, like even if you're a coach, say working with a chronic disease population, right? Like the different approach with the coach, maybe we're not gonna necessarily move, like we can't change the condition per se. We may not be able to change the situation or the condition, but what we can help our client do is change their response, right? We talk about this all the time in coaching, right? Like you can change their response to their reality. So we can't change their reality, but what we can help them work on is what do they do with that reality, right? So how do you find those embers? How do you find those sparks? What do you focus on in your situation? And we see this all the time, right? This is human nature. This is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. This is positive psychology. This is like what makes people survive horrible, terrible, traumatic kinds of things. Like some people have these stories and they do just these amazing things, and other people get a hangnail and like, it's they don't have the resilience, right? And it's
Mhm.
not, let me be very clear. This is not a flaw. This is not a weakness. Resilience is a skill. Like the research that we're looking at and learning, right? It doesn't come. Some people have it more innately, and it has to do with your all. There's so multimodal. There's so many things that factor into our well-being and our wellness. But at the end of the day, the more research that we look at, and the more that we look at all these things, what creates thriving, what creates longevity, what creates the ability to make simple daily choice habits. Man, those are the powerful things that ultimately, at the end of the day, and it's the analogy or the decision, like, it's not about judging or labeling whether things are good or bad in the moment. It's like, how am I going to respond to it? And it's taking that
Mhm.
pause. And gosh, I mean, this one, I must say, um, well, I'm going to just pause there and I'm going to hold that thought because I want to pause there because this takes on another tangent.
Mhm. We could tangent all night probably, and we probably should can hold that for maybe more episodes in the future or something like that.
Yeah,
So
that's why I think
uh,
that's a good one to pause and hold because it goes a different direction.
exactly, but uh, yeah, Elena, any thoughts on your end? We're kind of probably wrapping up here soon.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I've just been taking it all in and sort of reflecting myself as I've been listening here, and yeah, it's a lot of good thoughts that I need to work on. I think
Mhm.
to build that resiliency. Yeah,
We talked
I
a lot
like
about
the
resilience last time.
we
Re-
did, yeah,
in
and
like
the
we did repetition last time, Jeff. If you haven't
Mm,
mhm.
seen that one, that
I
we
haven't
just
seen that
dropped
one.
it. It's like not even a day old
Yeah,
while we're recording this, so
yeah,
it's
I just
fine.
came up
Like,
this morning.
Good that I don't
uh,
have to feel too guilty that I haven't
right.
watched it.
But
It's
it's funny
okay.
that you mentioned the term resiliency because we probably said it like 3, 5 times in the
Yeah,
last episode already.
yeah,
So it's becoming a seasonal theme, even.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the sort of the one summary that I want to sort of tie things up with for me, because I do know as you said, we're getting to time, and I'll let you do whatever you need to. But I think kind of to wrap everything back up because we were kind of all over the place, but to go back to kind of like the simple, to try to give a simple summary of what I've learned on this journey in the last couple of years of exploration, my own neurodivergence, ending into the coaching world, navigating the line between different professions and which paths I'm going to go in the world, and which ones pay the bills and which ones don't, and can I do some of both, and how do I find balance of that. At the end of the day, um, it so boils down, there's so much noise out there in health and wellness and social media, whether it's about neurodivergence and late diagnosis or what supplement to take or what exercise to do or what the secret to life is, Look, there's really, and I'm going to give a plug for National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coaches like Justin and I, who are National Board Certified, and for the organization, which has been around a little over a decade now, that creates this standard of practice. There is a
NBC-HWC.org.
Yep, and yeah,
I'll make sure
yeah,
it's linked in
yeah.
this video. We'll make sure to plug that.
So not downplaying any other coaches trained in either way. You can be a great coach, but if you're looking for people who have met a certain vetted standard and understand the science and the ethics and the practice of coaching around these models that we mentioned briefly, at the end of the day, look, we have the science and the knowledge now. You can go back. I'm going to tie back to sort of the ancient times, right? Like, I actually think that coaching in nature is like sort of like one of these things. It's growing. It's starting to be published on more. It's starting to be researched on more. There's more books on it. People like me and other people are getting attracted to it. But look, at the end of the day, this is what we did as human beings when we were hunters and gatherers and when we were living in tribal societies and we were living in smaller groups, right? We walked around with our peers. We had an issue. We walked around in nature. We were out. We talked it out, and we dealt with it with our close, trusted, whether they were, the medicine man or woman, whether it was the tribal leader, whether it was the chief counselor, whether it was a friend or family member, right? This is what we do as human beings and social creatures, and our connection to nature is elemental. So we know how to do this, and we've done this because that's where we came from. So it connects through in our DNA, it connects through the environments that our nervous systems were raised in, right? That we're born and bred in. And our nervous systems struggle a lot because we're in a technological world that's so different and so removed. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it's what we've learned is, right, going back to this, like how you live. It's not about, going to the gym 3 times a week or 5 times a week, or whether you're doing, resistant work and aerobic work or what, if you're sitting at a desk for 10 hours a day and not moving, I don't care how much you're working out, you're still gonna have all the problems of a sedentary life. So what it boils down to is simple daily choices. So, stagnation, let's go back to the cards. So stagnation, if you're not moving, you're dying. Okay, you're either actively living or you're actively dying. I said this long before I was doing coaching. I was like, if you are not doing something active towards trying to live, you are then actively pursuing death. There you go. Right? So stagnation. Now let's get curious about that, right? So curious, what is the opposite of stagnation? Stagnation is do something. And it's not about like once a week, go like ride your bike for 50 miles, like weekend warrior kind of stuff. What it is it's a simple modification. It's like, instead of like sitting at your desk, have a standing desk. Instead of sitting in a stagnant chair, sit on a ball that has a dynamic, right? So I know Justin does this, right? So that you have so you're constantly moving. It's like, don't put your printer right at your desk where you can reach it. Put it in the other room. Don't have a garbage can next to your desk. Like, don't have a recycle bin. Like, when I was in an office, like, everybody, like, they tried to keep things as close as possible. They tried to give me, like, oh, why don't you have a trash can in your office, Jeff? Or I never had an office, but near your workspace. Why don't you ever print at the printer no, I print in the printer that's a building a mile away. I didn't realize, everybody always like, you're such a free spirit, you're so crazy. I didn't realize I was neurodivergent, and these were just my OCD coping strategies to try to get through the freaking day, because I needed some sunlight and some movement and some music, and I couldn't sit still. So I've always had a wobble board and a standing desk and a therapy ball and a fidget and gum and, like the right binaural, like very right music, and like, I just thought I was just,
yeah.
And I have exploded, the ball that you're sitting on. I used to have to do payroll when I was a manager. I'd be every 2, I hate it. So I'd be listening, totally inappropriate music for a manager in a healthcare setting in any kind of like, but it's like, I had to have it in headphones, but it's still, that's very inappropriate, Yes, it's rap. It had to be rap. It was not a clean rap. To get through payroll, this is 60 people. This is a horrible experience for me. This is the worst. I would bounce so much on this ball that I literally, it had like a 550 pound like stress rating. The thing like exploded. I landed on my ass on the floor. Yeah, my boss was like, you can't have a ball at your desk anymore. It's too dangerous. You know? And what did I think? Because
Oh no.
I'm neurodivergent
In
and
my old
rejected from
corporate
force.
job, I asked to have a
I'm
ball.
like, they hate me. Hey, you all need balls. You can't say I can't have a ball. You need the ball. So like
I'm so glad Jeff unhinged at the end of this. This is perfect. This is such feral magic content.
so,
So
so the
it's
simple. Okay, to wrap it up,
it's great.
keep it simple. It's simple daily habits, right? Like,
Hmm.
what do you do? And it goes back to what your client shared with you, Justin. We're always learning from our clients. I don't care what kind of whether you're early childhood education, coaching, therapy, whatever.
It's a
We learn
peer. My clients are my peers,
and
right?
peers. Oh,
Coaches are a
peers.
peer relationship. That's like
Okay.
one of the other things that I didn't say earlier is like
Ah,
a coach properly views themselves as your peer, not
that
as
makes
a
sense.
superior relationship. The doctor has a superior, like knowledge
Yeah.
based relationship over a patient, and that is appropriate. But the coach takes a like horizontal
Mm.
position next to their client and helps the client to find answers and occasionally contributes directly with information,
Yeah.
but is more often like kind of helping the client. That's one of the ways to think about it.
Thank you for clarifying that, putting that out there. Yeah, the client, I'm so excited that I get to call my clients clients in my traditional setting now because I finally got to a place where I can not have to call them patients anymore. So I was like, I forgot how stigmatizing even clients is. It's pretty different. Anyway, yeah, it's simple things, right? So it's not Herculean efforts. It's the little choices that you make, and it goes back to what you shared earlier, which is like if it's not feeding you, if it's not stoking those embers in you, if it's not giving some energy back, if it doesn't feel right. And that's what we were talking about, right? Like we live in our heads so much. We chase that happiness. We think if I get that job, if I get that promotion, if I get that degree, if I please somebody, whoever it is, parent, partner, whatever, boss, client, or peer, whatever it is, right? And all that stuff. But that doesn't create happiness. That just gets us stuck in our head and creates all these layers of things where we do need therapists and things like that to help us untangle that messy web. Um, so if we drop down in, right? If we drop down into our bodies, if we listen to our hearts, our spirits, our energy, if we listen at the cellular level, if we listen to our gut brain, if we do those things, yep. Yeah, we know, right? We know it's just hard to cut through the noise and listen. But ultimately, like stagnation, it happens. It's part of nature, it's part of life. We all get stagnant. How do we get out of stagnation? The cards told us we be curious. And through curiosity, it's not about like, well, I don't exercise now, I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow. No, that's not necessary. That's an interesting experiment. We probably can predict the results of it. Feel free to give it a try. Not judging because I'm a coach. Absolutely. But let's make sure you get some data on this. But chasing happiness versus feeling, grounding down into it. We only have choice, right? We don't have. We love to pretend like we have control over lots of stuff, but we have very little control. What we have control over is not what's happening to us in the world or how the world's going. We only have control over how we react and respond, and that's within our control. That's in our inner nature to listen to ourselves, to ground back down, to take that pause, to get out of our heads. I mean, sometimes you have to think through things, but you also then have to feel through things and to connect those. And yeah, that's what things like this podcast, that's what things like coaching, they create space. We hold space, we're not judging, and we give an opportunity for that also important. I think as a coach, by holding space and showing compassion, and helping highlight the positive attributes of our peers that we're working with, we then model for and create an opportunity for our peers seeking coaching from us to start to experience and have an insight into how to develop some self-compassion. Because ultimately, that is really key. I don't know if happiness is always the answer, but certainly some acceptance and some self-compassion and some acknowledgement of, gosh, I'm showing up, I'm doing the best I can. I'm here. I matter. I'm seen and heard. If you can't see and hear yourself, how do you ever expect anybody else to see and hear you, right?
Yeah. Man, I don't know that I could summarize this episode any better than you already have, Jeff. And with that, I'm Justin the Wizard. I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach. Jeff, go ahead and give yourself a sign off, and then we'll
Yeah, so
call this a
Jeff,
show.
Coach Jeff, love to coach out in nature, do coach in many other ways, and coach under Functional Roots Wellness is my coaching gig, and really just a shout out to just all the people out there who are showing up. I don't care how, where, or what. If you are showing up genuinely, authentically, creating space for other people, if you are genuinely willing to listen and be present for another human being, man, just keep doing it. That matters so much. Yeah, and I just sign off for that. Just, man, we just got to take
Jeff
care of
and
each
I
other.
can be found on vibely.io for our coaching, for our private practice coaching at least. Um, you can find, I can be found more than one way. Jeff's, I think, coaching is only the one way right
Yep,
now, besides the
yep,
local audience in Virginia.
yep.
So if you're located in Virginia and want to reach out to Jeff for coaching, leave a comment and we'll make sure you get in touch.
Yeah.
Elena?
Yeah, I'm Elena Lunt. I'm your chaos coordinator. I am hoping that your curiosity can nourish your stagnation to grow happiness. And I'm the reason why the do not feed wildlife signs exist. Oops.